The legislature's called to order. Assistant Majority Leader Joseph Augustine, you are recognized.
Madam Speaker, I move to adopt the 10th special session agenda for September 13, 2018.
On the motion to adopt the 10th special session agenda for September 13, are there any objections? Hearing no objections, motion carries. Assistant Majority Leader, you are recognized.
Madam Speaker, I move to waive special session agenda items 2 through 6.
On the motion to waive the special session agenda items 2 through 6, are there any objections? Hearing no objections, motion carries. Roll call. Clerk, please take the roll call.
Senator Atta, Senator Uggan, Senator Castro, Senator Espaldon, Senator Esteves, Senator Lee, Senator Morrison, Senator Munoz, Senator Nelson, Senator Rodriguez, Senator San Augustine, Senator San Nicolas, Acting Speaker Terlahi, Senator Torres. Madam Speaker, there is a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Assistant Majority Leader, you are recognized.
Madam Speaker, I move to approve legislative journals dated February 28, 2018, second special session February 28, 2018, third special session February 28, 2018, fourth special session March 1st, 2018, fifth special session March 4th, 2018, sixth special session March 8, 2018, seventh special session March 8, 2018, eighth special session and June 27th, ninth special session, subject to corrections.
On the motion to approve the legislative journals, is there any objection? Hearing no objection, motion carries. Assistant Majority Leader, you are recognized.
Madam Speaker, I move that the message from the Magalahin Guahan be appended to today's special session journal.
All right, this is to confirm that you're all in receipt of the message from Imagalahin Guahan. Is there anyone who doesn't have a copy? This is not it. Where's the 3 million? Isn't that what you passed out to everybody?
No, this is what I
I beg your pardon. I would like to just clarify that on your desk, there is a copy stamped by my office at 3:33 p.m. But after that, that was a hand-delivered message from the governor. But after that, there was an email sent with a revised bill. So we are making copies of that, and we would be passing that out and proceeding. It would just take us a couple more minutes. Yes.
Madam Speaker, is this a completely revised bill or completely separate bill?
He's revised his call to session for us to address the bill that will be passed out right now.
So has the bill that we have right now, has that been withdrawn for consideration?
It hasn't been withdrawn.
I guess my concern is, regardless of whether it's been placed on the agenda or not, it would still be a bill sent down by the governor.
Yes, so we have both bills sent down by the governor, and we are about to entertain a motion regarding one of them. So I beg your indulgence, please, for the copies. All right. All right, there's a motion that the message from Imagalahan Guahan that is on your desks at this moment, that was received by the legislature at 3:33 p.m., that be appended to today's special session journal. That motion was approved with no objection. I'm going to now ask the Legislative Secretary, Senator Lee, will you please read the message from Imagalahan Guahan into the record?
Sidus Masi, Madam Speaker, we are in receipt of a letter from the Office of the Governor dated September 13th, 2018, addressed to the Honorable Therese M. Terlahi, Acting Speaker, Imene 34 na Legislature in Guahan. Dear Madam Vice Speaker, pursuant to my authority under Section 1423H of the Organic Act of Guam, I am calling the Legislature in Guahan into special session this afternoon, Thursday, September 13th, 2018, at 5 p.m., for the sole purpose of considering the attached proposed bill entitled An Act to Appropriate Funds for Emergency Expenditures Resulting from Typhoon Mangkhut. Thank you for your efforts towards ensuring the swift recovery of our island community. Sinceramente, Eddie Baza Calvo.
Sidus Masi. Assistant Majority Leader, you are recognized.
Madam Speaker, I move to waive special session agendas items 11 and 12.
On the motion to waive those special session items 11 and 12, are there any objections? Hearing no objections, motion carries. Assistant Majority Leader, you are recognized.
Madam Speaker, I move that introduced bill number 1, parenthesis 10-S, be deemed to have been given its first reading.
Is the bill passed out? The bill, does everyone have a copy of that bill? All right, on the motion, are there any objections? Hearing no objections, motion carries. Majority Leader, you're recognized.
Madam Speaker, I move to excuse members.
Sorry, Senator Atta, you are recognized.
I just have a question, Madam Speaker. On the transmittal letter that was dated, timestamp 3:33 p.m., attached to it was a bill that was submitted by Magalahan Guahan requesting the amount of $1 million. What's been passed around is so the bill for $1 million does not have a bill number put on it. However, on our desks, we have a bill 110-S that has been circulated, and it's for $3 million. So the question then is, so it's a little confusing now because we got this 110-S for $3 million, and attached to the transmittal letter is a bill, unnumbered bill, for $1 million.
Madam Speaker,
Yes, Senator Sinek.
I'd make a motion that the bill that's attached that has the bill number 1 parentheses 10S, that's stamp dated 2018 September 13, 5:25 p.m. be the bill that we address tonight? Because that's the only bill that has a number on it.
Yes or no? All right. Thank you again for your patience. I'm sorry there's been a confusion because, yes, there has been multiple correspondence, but just to clarify, so the message that the clerk read, that the legislative secretary read, attached to it is a bill, and I'm entertaining a motion that this bill, and in your copies it's not numbered, but the clerks will number it 1 parentheses 10-S if this motion passes, to put this on the special session. So the motion is to entertain this bill that's in front of you on your desks that doesn't have a number, but the clerks will number it 1 10-S. So the motion is to that this bill be deemed to have been given its first reading. Is there any objection?
Madam Speaker, just for clarification, you're talking about the bill that is attached to the letter from the governor that is time-stamped at 3:33 p.m.? That one?
That's correct.
So it was basically the first communication from the governor's office.
Yes.
And so you're saying that the motion right now before us is to accept this bill as one that we will be hearing.
The motion is that this bill be deemed to have been given its first reading.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Point of order, Madam Speaker.
Yes.
I think that the question is which bill? We have one letter that's been time-stamped. We have another letter that has no timestamp. Are we talking about the bill that accompanies the timestamp letter, or the bill that accompanies the letter that was not timestamped?
All right. We are entertaining motions on the letter with the timestamp right now. We've read that message, and we are entertaining the attached bill, which, according to the clerks, will be numbered, if this motion passes, 110-S. So please disregard that other unless there is a motion on something else. But this, we're going to proceed with this one that was hand-delivered. All right. Is there a motion? Is there a motion, Mr. Assistant Majority Leader? Is there a motion to place the bill on the special session agenda? We're still in motions. Is there any motion?
Yes, Madam Speaker. I move that introduced bill number 1, parentheses 10-S, be deemed to have been given its first reading.
That motion's been passed.
It was passed?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, was that an objection? Let me call it again. Is there any objection to deeming this bill attached to the letter timestamped 3:33 p.m. that it has been given its first reading? Is there any objection?
Madam Speaker, with all due respect, the motion that was just made by the Assistant Majority Leader was a motion that is marked 1 parentheses 10-S, close parentheses. The one that you're referring to right now, I believe, that's attached to the governor's letter that's time-stamped at 3:33 is not the one that's marked.
That's correct.
So the question before, the motion before us is whether or not to accept the one that's marked 110-S, which is not the original submission, right? That's what's is moved to have been placed on the second reading file. So we're going to disregard the original one that's time-stamped?
No. That motion, Senator St. Augustine had withdrawn. We are only on this motion for this, the time-stamped version.
Can we take a 1-minute recess so we can make this
Yes.
clear from the very start?
Sure, and I'm going
Thank
to
you.
make sure that if the clerks pass out a numbered version, so.
Mic check 1 2, testing 1 2.
Thank you, colleagues. We're back from recess. On your desks, you should now find a stamped 3:33 p.m. transmittal letter from the governor with a bill attached that has no number. You should also find on your desks Bill 110-S that introduced by the Committee on Rules by request of Imagalaw and Guahan. All right, and we are...
Just a point of information, and also on the header, it should read 2018 10th Special Session.
Yes, thank you. So
All
the
right.
handwriting, 10th special session. Thank you. Assistant Majority Leader, you were on a motion to...
Yes, Madam Speaker.
To place.
I move that introduce bill number 1, parentheses 10-S, be deemed to have been given its first reading.
Or is there any objection? No objection, that motion carries.
Madam Speaker, I move to excuse members not present for today's special session.
On the motion to excuse members not present for today's special session, is there any objection? Hearing no objection, motion carries.
Madam Speaker, notwithstanding the House rules, I move to place Bill number 1, parentheses 10-S, onto the special session agenda.
On the motion to place Bill number 110-S onto the special session agenda, is there any objection? No objection. Motion carries.
Madam Speaker, I move to resolve into the Committee of the Whole for the purpose of deliberating and addressing matters on Bill number 1, parentheses 10-S, and that Senator Atta, Chairman, the Committee on Appropriations, as the committee chair, chair the Committee of the Whole, and invite the following panels guests, which were they're identified there in the public hearing area.
All right, it's my understanding that those guests have been sworn in. On the motion to resolve into the Committee of the Whole for purposes of deliberating and addressing matters on Bill number 110-S, are there any objections? Senator Lee, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just a point of inquiry. Are we waiving the public hearing on this bill?
Oh. Okay. Yes. Yes, I have, pursuant to statute, as acting speaker of Imina 34 na Legislature in Guahan, I hereby certify in conformity with 2 GCA 2103A that an emergency condition exists involving danger to public health and safety, and waive the statutory requirement for a public hearing on Bill 110-S. Thank you. On the motion to resolve into the Committee of the Whole, that was the motion is there any objection? No objection, motion carries. They've been sworn in, so we could invite the panel members in. We will 1 minute recess to switch the mics.
Committee of the Whole is called to order. Present with us this evening is, well, go ahead, gentlemen, and introduce yourselves.
Affidavit, good evening. Lester Carlson, Deputy Director, BBMR.
Edward Byrne, Department of Administration.
Charles Esteves, Administrator, Office Civil Defense.
Glenn Leon Guerrero, Director for the Department of Public Works.
Rod Leon Guerrero, Guam National Guard.
So we're going to be discussing Bill 110-S. It was introduced by the governor, and basically the bill is to request the authorization to utilize any part or a portion of $1 million of the general fund to meet the recovery efforts and also for purposes of FEMA reimbursement. But at this point, I think I'm going to go ahead and let the administration go ahead and articulate what it is that they are asking for, and then we can open it up for questions. So, Mr. Carlson.
Mr. Chairman, just a
Yes, sir.
point of inquiry, because you're allowing the administration to be able to provide some initial comments. My understanding is that the legislature also received a subsequent version, which we are not entertaining on the floor at the moment, but much of their comments may reflect the subsequent version that was submitted to this legislative body. So will you be allowing the nature of the questions to reflect on the bill and any of the sections of the subsequent bill that was forwarded to this body? Will you allow that discussion to proceed?
And I think the comments will be prompted by a question as to how much do you really need.
Okay. I just wanted to ensure that there's flexibility there, Mr. Chairman, because obviously you're allowing the administration to provide initial comments, and they may highlight their subsequent legislation that was presented to this body. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Carlson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here before you today for a very straightforward and simple reason. We are out of spending authority to be able to address the dire needs of the community after the passing and subsequent devastation that occurred through Typhoon Mangkhut. Plain and simple, we're here to ask for, I know there was some confusion with respect to the receipt of bills, but to be clear, we're asking for $3 million of legislative authority to be able to address the many needs that we have before us as a community. And we have the relevant personnel here to be able to answer any and all questions that you might have. But plain and simple, we're out of authority. We need your help. Thank you.
Do any of the members have questions? Senator Uggan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and welcome to the representatives from the administration. I know, Mr. Carlson, you started off by stating that the governor or the executive branch has run out of spending authorization. So is that very similar to appropriation authorization for fiscal year 18, because we are still in fiscal year 18?
Could you restate that or say it again?
Okay. Well, you're asking for, you started off and you made a statement that the executive branch is out of spending authority. So is that similar in nature to out of appropriation authorization that is contained in the budget bill for fiscal year 18?
Yes, sir. For everybody, particularly the listening public's information, the governor does not have special fund transfer authority. We're here before you today to seek your approval to allow for the governor to tap special funds to be able to augment the resources necessary for the continued recovery, restoration of the island because of the typhoon.
Thank you very much. Mr. Carlson, I think you really hit the nail on the head, so to speak, in terms of, Mr. Chairman, why we are here. and that really the governor does need to be able to access cash in some of these special funds, which by law in the budget bill are restricted from the executive branch expending those funds other than what it is appropriated for in the budget bill. So I think that just by virtue of making that statement, let me follow on with the initial request was for $1 million. And that was a letter that was transmitted to this body about 4 p.m. a little earlier. And then the legislature also received, not even an hour, hour and a half later, another version that increased that spending authorization from $1 million to $3 million. Can you just share with members of the body in terms of where your requirements are and why that number changed within a matter of 2 hours?
Yeah, I'll start, and then I'll have Mr. Esteves provide some additional information, because he has been the recipient of many of the requests for funding and for costs incurred to date, along with, of course, Mr. Leon Guerrero and Major General Leon Guerrero, to be able to help substantiate what it is that they collectively, as they head, you know, they're the true heads of the recovery effort between the Guard and DPW. But when we realized that we were going to have, on top of everything else, a need to have local funds. The governor, I'm hoping everybody's aware, he is requesting for a designation of a natural disaster. We're going to need to have some matching funds. So part of what it is that we're asking for will be included in resources available to avail ourselves of any federal assistance that may come about from the governor's request. We have costs that we have incurred. I can actually just begin by saying that the first $250,000 that we provided in the emergency declaration has been expended. And Mr. Esteves can give you the details. We are out of authorization to be able to provide what we need to do. And with that, I'll ask Mr. Esteves and both Mr. Leon Guerrero and Major General Leon Guerrero to answer any questions on exactly what those costs entail.
Half a day. For the initial $250,000 that we're given, the expenses that we have incurred to date is $80,000 in overtime. And when I say overtime is just the account we put it in, but that $80,000 includes salaries, wages, fringe, and the slight daily, everything we basically need to put a soldier on state active duty. That does not include the overtime for folks that were activated in the Emergency Operations Center. It doesn't include the Mayor's Council of Guam. And that $80,000 that we initially budgeted for was strictly for the Guard, and that's not even, that won't even cover extending them past the initial 5 days, which we do need them for traffic control, debris management, and also to augment the GPD for security at the shelters, and possibly even at debris waste sites, places where we'll be putting generators. Additionally, we've spent on fuel for the various generators. I just want to let you know that prior to the storm, agencies topped off their generators, and that did not come from this $250,000. That came from their budget, so generators were topped off. It's all the refueling costs afterwards that we tapped into the initial we tapped in this $250,000. And there are a lot of, there are Government of Guam agencies that are without power, and there are also Government of Guam agencies that do not have generator power. DYA is an example of one of those agencies where we would have to, we're trying to work to rent a generator for them, but they have been without power for some time. Department of Corrections is another agency where we have to constantly refuel them. Additionally, we've procured a number of heavy equipment, equipment not organic to Department of Public Works. And I have a breakdown if need be in the cost. So we've busted $250,000 and actually went over it. And I can talk the FEMA reimbursement process, major disaster deck process if need be, and what that looks like.
Mr. Chairman, because he has some information that could be helpful to members of the body, if we can get copies of some of the initial expenditures of the $250,000.
Sure.
Yeah, just one follow-on comment after.
Okay.
You know, we understand that there's a major emergency out there, and many of you have worked long hours over the course of the last 3-4 days, from the Emergency Operations Center to our law enforcement personnel, first responders, the mayors, the vice mayors, all of their staff members. And we know that we need to get our people back to a strong semblance of normalcy. So I just want to extend our appreciation, or at least my appreciation, for all of the efforts, because since day one, a few hours after the storm had passed, our men and our women out there with the appropriate expertise and training were out there already addressing some of the needs of our people in terms of trying to assist families with shelter, trying to assist families to try to get back to their places, or just to clear debris so that people can traverse our road. So I want to thank all of your men and women out there. And I'm sorry, General, you're sitting in front of us, and I did not mention the National Guard. So also the National Guard's men and women have been very, very helpful in the last few days. And we just want to thank you all for those efforts, and I look forward to continued discussion on the specifics of the authorization that the governor is requesting. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Ruggan. Senator Rodriguez?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being here. Thank you also for the work that you guys are doing to restore our island back to some sense of, to bring it back to normal. I fully support this this effort to provide you know, the resources that's needed to help our people. I just have some few questions I'd like to ask, and this is perhaps directed to Mr. Carlson. This bill right now says 1 million, but the intent is 3 million. So you're going to need an amendment on the floor here to increase that 1 million to 3 million. Is that correct?
We would appreciate very much elevating this discussion to the $3 million request.
Okay, so before I consider moving that myself, this bill, Section 3, gives the governor authority to transfer this $3 million from any funds, any special funds within the executive branch for this purpose. Do you have what funds may have any surplus that the governor will be tapping into? Because I think that would really get us focused into where we know exactly where it's coming from. And this is an emergency basis, so we understand that. But also what the consequences will be once those funds are tapped and those funds not being used for what we intended it to be used for. Okay?
Thank you very much, Senator Rodriguez. First fund that we'd like to be able to get your approval for, again, this is generally speaking, but we're looking at the Guam Highway Fund. Most of that money is what it is that's used to fund the operations that Mr. Leon Guerrero takes control of on a day-to-day basis. Given the fact that it's September 13th, we all come to a realization that he cannot spend all of what it is that he was allocated. And we had some discussions earlier, and we're looking about asking somewhere in the neighborhood of about $1.25 million from the Guam Highway Fund. Additionally, we're looking at the Healthy Future Fund. Similarly, another $1.25 million, maybe as much as the remaining amounts necessary. But those two funds primarily are what it is we're looking for this body's concurrence and approval to be able to tap.
Is there the other balance of where you anticipate? Because that's 2.5, right?
You know, there might be some general fund ability, very nominal. I think that might, as long as his body concurs, that can be done with the governor's transfer authority. I think that's within his 15%. But I think from a perspective of being able to get everything that we need, if we could get the concurrence from the body to be able to tap both of those funds, you know, to address what we do and minimize or not even use the general fund, given what we went through with the fiscal realignment plan and everything else that we've consistently talked to you guys about. There isn't a lot of meat on the bone to be able to transfer out and not actually, you know, impair operations. So those two are, if we could, I don't know, 1.5 from each.
Okay, so is this a surplus, or this is funds within these two funds that, as you said earlier, you won't be able to expend come the end of this fiscal year?
A point of information too, the Department of Public Works does not have continuing appropriation authority, so it's, you know, that adage of use it or lose it, you know. And Mr. Leongaro assured me that he'll be fine for the rest of the year. Again, the Department of Public Works does not have in the fiscal 2018 budget continuing appropriation authority. So if there was anything that they didn't expend, they don't have the luxury of rolling it over to next fiscal year. So it's kind of like a use it or lose it kind of thing. Okay. So that's one of the factors we took into consideration. We did confer with Director Leon Guerrero, and he's very supportive.
Okay, so that's 2.5. So you're fine if we amend this to 2.5 and specifically name the two funds that you have mentioned?
I think we revised that request after me and Mr. Burns looked at each. I'm sorry. Normally, there's not a problem hearing Lester Carlson talk, but Senator, if I could revise that request and ask the body to consider 1.5 million from the Guam Highway Fund and 1.5 million from the Healthy Futures Fund.
Okay, thank you. So my second question is, I know Mr. Esteves, you talked about what you already, at least partially, used the 250,000 for. So what other items are needed from this 3 million?
So before I explain what we're going to use up to $3 million for, let me just explain the reimbursement process. When we actually receive a major disaster declaration, whatever that amounts between what we originally estimated and what FEMA estimates when we do our joint damage assessment, we're looking at possible reimbursement. Well, we're looking at reimbursable costs in debris and waste management, and so that's actually a big chunk of the effort right now. And estimated cost for debris and waste management is $250,000 just for green waste alone, and then brown waste and metallic waste is probably looking at another $100,000. There's also thank you. Also, the operational overtime is reimbursable as well. When we received overtime requests, and this is for personnel working in the Emergency Operations Center, it's for the surge from first responders, it's also for the ongoing recovery activities. We received, and this is not only from line agencies, but this is also from the Mayor's Council of Guam as well, estimated overtime at $750,000 plus. And then we're looking at fuel to continue ongoing fuel operations for the various generators we have is approximately $100K, and then about $50,000 for miscellaneous funds. And so the amount is not going to equal up to $3 million. And what Mr. Carlson said was the remaining amount we have will be used for that 75-25 cost match. We had a lot of lessons learned from Typhoon Dolphin, especially in terms of what's reimbursable and what's not. And I can tell you that every single cost that came through the Emergency Operations Center was heavily scrutinized to make sure that should we receive a major disaster deck, that the cost is reimbursable. And so one of the problems that we had, and this is not a problem that only Guam has faced, but a lot of the 54 states and territories have experienced this as well, is the ability to meet that cost match and to meet it in a timely manner. Once we get the major disaster deck, if we get the major disaster deck, we only have about 5 years from cradle to grave for these projects. There's a misnomer that FEMA just hands us a pot of money, but it's a purely reimbursable process. It's a hard and soft match as well, so it's not only the cost match, we may have already met it just through some of the ongoing activities. And it'll be FEMA to make that determination. Yeah, but what we're trying to prevent is mission creep. We don't want to request $1 million now, and then we find that next week, because of some unknown reason, we need another $1 million, and after that, we need another $1 million to bring the island back to normalcy. As you know, and with this $250K that we initially requested, I can tell you that a lot of the costs, they just started to add up really quick. And there were a lot of costs that we have denied as well. We maintain a system of record. FEMA has access to this system of record too, called Disasterland. We have a trouble ticket matching every single request for either equipment, contractual type of services, whatever it may be. So we have the proper and necessary documentation to seek reimbursement.
Okay, thank you very much. If anyone can answer this, so I understand what you've explained and what it's being used for, and I support all of that. But are there any direct assistance to families or to farmers that are part of this $3 million request that could be used for, I don't know, for food or for housing or for other necessities that families have been displaced? Is this $3 million going to cover that, or are other programs covering that now?
There are other programs covering that right now. So we are covering the cost for the shelter operations and support of the shelter operations, the overtime for the shelter operations. But currently we have our volunteer organizations active in disasters, the American Red Cross, Catholic Social Services, the Salvation Army, all assisting right now to provide feeding for the shelterees and displaced individuals. Should a need arise, we can use this $3 million to provide meals for shelterees, and that would be reimbursable.
Okay. Okay, so my last question before I move the amendment, Mr. Chair, is on Section 4. It says that you have 60 days of enactment to use these funds. Is that how long you need, or is that something that you anticipate to be able to use before the 60 days?
So as we anticipate getting the major disaster deck, from our initial damage assessment, and this is only a preliminary damage assessment, we're about $5 million right now. These damage assessments are ongoing. FEMA actually gives us 30 days to conduct this damage assessment with FEMA. And from there, we anticipate the estimated damages to start going up. 60 days is enough time for us to use it. And should the need arise for us to extend it for whatever the reason may be, then we'll have to cross that bridge when we get there. But we don't anticipate the recovery, the getting back to normalcy to go past 60 days. However, the recovery portion will last years. And just to put it in perspective, we are still recovering from how long? And we're still recovering from Dolphin. And those are ongoing project worksheets that we have open today. In Hurricane Katrina, the state of Louisiana is still recovering with open project worksheets with FEMA. And so the recovery process is a long process.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Chair, given that I'd like to move the amendment on page 2 of the bill, line 2, or starting on line 1, to not to exceed, to amend $1 million to $3 million, and to strike out general fund, and to include the Guam Highway Fund and the, which one was it? The Healthy Futures Fund, with the understanding that it's 1.5 million from each fund. So if legal or the clerks can assist in that amendment.
So there's a motion to amend the requested amount from $1 million to $3 million. And the second part to that amendment is identifying the special fund source where that $3 million will come from. So why don't we bifurcate that and first of all discuss the amount of $3 million, and then we can discuss the source of that $3 million. So anyone on the amendment for the $3 million, Senator Uggan?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I certainly support the proposed amendment by the good senator, and primarily because this is what was highlighted by the administration representative, that there's, in situations like this, in an emergent situation, there may be certain circumstances which may be identified as unexpected. And we want to provide the chief executive with as much flexibility as possible to be able to not only access funds, but to be able to carry out the job of this full recovery. So I certainly support the motion to adjust the figure to $3 million. And also I appreciate the perspective of the executive branch representatives of identifying exactly where they would like those funds to originate from, so that in fact it's not just a carte blanche authorization, but it specifically highlights where some of these funds may originate. So I support the proposed amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Anyone else on the amendment? Senator San Nicolas, and then Senator Lee, and then Senator Espaldon.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. I'm at a loss. In the initial question of where the $250,000 was spent, the only hard figure we got was $80,000 in overtime. We didn't receive a hard figure on fuel for generators. We didn't receive a hard figure on heavy equipment. So for $250K, all we can account for is $80K. When the question was asked about why $3 million, we were told $250,000 for green waste, $100,000 for metallic waste, another $750,000 for overtime, $100,000 for fuel, and $50,000 for miscellaneous, which adds up to $1,250,000. On the initial $250K, I don't have any hard numbers. On this request for $3 million, we can barely account for half of that. The remainder is being spoken about for matching FEMA money. We don't even have an emergency declaration yet. The way this bill is written, Mr. Chairman, you can take that $3 million and go out and issue contracts. It's also including notwithstanding language on the Guam procurement law, so it kind of minimizes the threshold for what those contracts would require. I'm actually very disturbed at the course of these proceedings. I can understand if we need to increase the authorization from $250,000 to perhaps a higher amount that we can justify, which we haven't even done so yet. But to now go so far as to not only increase it, but to appropriate further is very troublesome. We haven't reconciled any of these numbers. The initial $250K isn't accounted for in this discussion. The $3 million. I mean, it sounds like you guys are winging it. Do we have damage assessments? Can we see those? Who did them? And then even if we do incur an amount that we need to pay for this storm, shouldn't we get those terms on net 30 basis? So if we do have to figure out a contract, we're able to identify how much they're going to charge us in order to do a service? The Power Authority is mentioning that we are already at 88% recovery, and yet we're still talking about another 100,000 in fuel. Mr. Chairman, it really sounds like we're just trying to justify, using the storm, using an emergency, we're just trying to justify authorizing the expenditure of Highway Fund money and Healthy Futures Fund money for contracts that are really unjustified at this point. I can understand OT for the Guard, I can understand OT for the DPW workers. I'm sure they can provide us with the timesheets if we need to see those to be able to validate the amounts. You got to certify those documents also. But that was $80,000 in overtime. And now we're asking for $3 million, and I have no idea where that's being spent. Can we get more clarification? Do you guys have actual documents?
Yes, so we have the entire first 250,000 broken down right here by expense, available for your review. Additionally, this is an emergency event, which means, and we don't know what the expected damages are right now. I mean, we have a preliminary damage assessment, but there are so many things that we haven't even looked at yet. And I'll give you an example. There were fires that happened as a result of this storm. Okay, who can predict a fire? I can't. There are systems that are going to go down because we have other systems that are degraded. Who's going to predict those systems going down? Because I can't. Okay, every system from sewage, electricity, academics, trash and debris, infrastructure, these are all degraded systems right now. And when you have one part of the system that's degraded, you're going to have another system down the line that is probably going to fail as a result. We received the same report, 85% of power is restored. And that's not a true number. That's 85% of the 63 feeders that are restored. But that's not 85% island restoration. Because if that were the case, then everyone would be going to school today. This 250K was heavily micromanaged. We had plenty of requests from agencies for material and supply support, contractual support. I've denied OT in relation to this because they were budgeted for it and it wasn't in relation to storm response. If you think the $3 million is just going to be spent willy-nilly, the answer is no, because FEMA will not reimburse us for an expense that's not reimbursable. They will not reimburse us for something we don't have proper documentation on.
But the expenditures in this bill are not contingent on FEMA reimbursements.
They are not. They are contingent on us getting the island back to normalcy.
So, Mr. Chairman, I mean, the current speaker even very plainly said we don't know what these costs are. So why are we appropriating a sum? Let's appropriate for the amounts that we do know that we have incurred. Let's encumber what we need to encumber for the ongoing recovery, have those proven encumbrances brought before this body on an ongoing basis, and appropriate from there. But for us to just give a blanket $3 million check and then figure out what you're going to spend it on, it's almost like price gouging on the government side. or taxpayer gouging in an emergency. Let's figure out how much the actual costs are for us to do this recovery and then appropriate from there. If the 250,000 has been fully encumbered, if we can get actuals on what the remaining OT is, then maybe we can increase the authorization to fund that. But when we're saying we don't know how much this is going to cost, just give me $3 million because it's an emergency, that's not the way it works.
Senator, or may I
General.
speak?
Sure.
So just from the guard perspective, you weren't given an opportunity to hear about the guard and what we have to, the services we provide and the costs. And so we did our cost analysis, and so there's no such thing as overtime for a guardsman. They get paid for a 1 day's wage. And so we have 146 soldiers and 20 airmen that are on what we call SAD, State Active Duty. So that means the federal government's not paying for it, government of Guam is. And so the cost analysis for 1 day for 166 soldiers is roughly 25,000, 24,832,000. So our cost analysis, that's just for personnel. And so for the last 4 days, we've accumulated $91,167 for pay. And then, I'm sorry, that's for pay and equipment. So we did our average costs per day per personnel, and then our average costs for fuel, for consumptions. And so our average cost per day is about $27,577.23. And so we figure a worst case scenario, we're going to do this for 21 days. And so our total cost estimate for the National Guard is about $580,000. So that's a guard perspective. And I don't think that Chuck or Lester talked about that. Does that help?
It does, thank you, General. And that's for 21 days of utilizing the guard.
I'm sorry?
That's for 21 days of utilizing the guard.
That's correct.
And we've already utilized the guard for 4 days. So that's assuming we use them for about another 17 days or 2 more weeks,
Right.
thereabouts.
Yes, sir.
Senator Nicholas for DPW.
I'm sorry, Mr. Younger, if I could just go back to the general real quick because something just popped in my head.
Sorry.
If FEMA gives us an emergency declaration, does that allow for that guard cost to be federally funded?
I don't know what happens when FEMA gets involved. All I know is this is what it costs. So it is reimbursed.
That would be a reimbursed cost.
Yes, sir.
For the Department of Public Works, I'll use the general's words, our mission was different. There was a 2-day pre-landfall declaration. That was the initial $250,000 that allowed us to deploy and preset. So just for the 2 days, talking 12-hour shifts, for 2 days, 24 hours total, for my people, just it cost about $75,600 for overtime. And that includes actually work for bus drivers during the storm, et cetera.
I apologize, Mr. Leangaro. Can you just repeat that figure, please?
$75,600. Post-storm, for rental equipment, which Chuck had mentioned that we needed rental equipment for. We have a total of 10 backhoes, but not all of them were working. So we needed to make sure that we had ample equipment and assets available. So the rental that we were looking for was about $34,000. Fuel costs for DPW, our anticipated cost is $10,000. Materials and supplies, it's $25,000. Signal lights and signs, this is an actual assessment that we have, $40,000. So the majority of our costs will be the debris cleanup. As of this point in time, what we wanted to do is we wanted to make sure that the roadways were clear, the routed roads were clear anyways. So we just moved the debris to the site. We didn't pick them up, we just moved it to the site so we have access, everybody would have access. And then that was day one. Within the first maybe 6 to 8 hours. So we could declare Core 4 at noon on Tuesday. I don't know, my days are mixed up, so forgive me, senators. Post that, after we cleared the routed roads, our goal was to go, and the mayors would clear up the secondary and the tertiary roads. What we did was we wanted to make sure that we helped with the secondary and tertiary roads in terms of big tree trunks, and especially we focused in on the bus routes because we wanted to get the schools up and running. So, so debris cleanup, overtime costs for 50 DPW employees. Again, the planning horizon, as the general pointed out, is 3 weeks. We're looking at stopping our spending for this event on September 27th. So my overtime cost will be at about $350,000 just for overtime. And then we need to clear, we need to process the debris, the green waste and some of the metallic waste. He mentioned $250,000, and that's what we're contracting out to permitted contractors to pick up the debris and take it to a site which is permitted by EPA and dispose of the green waste and some of the metallic waste. And that's my cost. My costs, I don't have the metallic waste, but I have just the green waste. I'm looking at a total of $784,600. My assessment to the compound of DPW is about $62,750. I don't know if Chuck's got that PDA, the preliminary damage assessment, but mine is about $62,000. So my total cost that I'm looking at, Senator San Nicolas, is $847,350.
So for DPW is $847,000 estimate.
Yes, sir.
And for the guard is $580,000 estimate. Mr. Chairman, just a point of inquiry. Does everybody have a copy of this breakdown that was circulated on the first 250K? So, Mr. Leon Guerrero, the $847,000, is that what you're projecting going forward, or is that what you're projecting your total?
The $75,000 that we spent in overtime, that's already spent. We spent some of the remaining $700,000 that I was speaking of. But that's going forward, and it'll carry us through September 27th, sir.
So 847 minus 75 is what your forward numbers are?
Sorry?
847 minus 75 is what your forward needs are going to be?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, that takes me to 1.3 million based on what the guards' needs are, and that's assuming, you know, a full 14 days more at the current utilization of the guard. And that's what DPW is saying their needs are going to be in order to be able to do their work. Looking at the spreadsheet that was provided on the contractual, it comes out to it's 144,000 on contractual and 25,000 on miscellaneous. That's 170. So the 80,000 is the other overtime? That's the 75,000 that Mr. Longuero was talking about thereabouts. Okay. So if the amount, Mr. Chairman, is 1.3 million, why are we entertaining a motion for $3 million?
Senator, that's just a guard, and that's DPW alone. We estimated 750,000 for overtime from all other line agencies to include the Mayor's Council of Guam. So if you include that into your figure, that would raise it to somewhere in the ballpark of $2.some million. And the fuel is just DPW's fuel alone that we estimate $100,000, and that's for different government of Guam agencies that are still running on generators. And then just the miscellaneous, whether it's safety equipment, chainsaws, shovels, any sort of miscellaneous expenses. We gave a figure of 50,000, but that's the miscellaneous expenses, especially since we are obligated to feed the National Guard, since the governor called them to stay active duty. The state has to provide them with 3 meals a day. And those are where some of the costs start to increase. The thing is, the Guard gave an anticipated end date, but that's just a rough estimate. If that end date moves to the right, then we would have to be here on a Thursday in the evening when we could be at the Emergency Operations Center trying to get the island back to normalcy.
General Leonguero, the estimate that you have on the 166 soldiers is 25,000 a day. When is that actually payable? Because I know we're not paying them on a daily basis.
So the way we work it is we now fall into the GovGuam pay system. So timesheets are due tomorrow, and it's critical that we get this money because in the past, I believe it was in 1999 when soldiers had to wait for a year to get paid. And so some soldiers left their civilian jobs because they want to serve our island. And if we don't pay our soldiers, and I manage this, I micromanage this because I want to make sure our soldiers and airmen are paid. And so timesheets are due tomorrow. DOA has a tough job to process 166 new employees into the system, and then hopefully they'll get their paychecks next week, Friday.
But their current accruals are covered under the 250,000 already.
I'm sorry?
The current amounts that are owed to the soldiers that have been working already is part of that 250,000 expenditure?
That 580 is?
No, the current 250 that's been exhausted, they're going to get paid. That's already funded.
I believe so, yes, sir.
Partial.
Mr. Chairman, there's just several things that occur to me as we work these numbers. The first is that this discussion of the additional overtime that we're going to be accruing, of course we're going to need to pay whatever is accrued on the personnel side, but we also need to be mindful of the fact that FEMA is going to be giving reimbursements if there is a declared emergency. The way the bill is written that creates concern is we're going to basically front all the money with the appropriation, and then FEMA will reimburse, and then whatever FEMA reimburses, we are going to put back into the general fund if we can, or put back into the special fund if we can. The question is, what if we can't? If there's a restriction on that, then we get those reimbursements, and then there's an imbalance here in terms of what the local government was funding versus what we're able to recover back into the general fund or into these special funds. Perhaps what we should consider, Mr. Chairman, is instead an amendment to fund the 1.3 million, or maybe even make it 1.5 million, half of the 3 million they're asking for, and then allow for the FEMA reimbursement process to play out and see also if our accruals on the DPW side and the National Guard side are going to continue to track at that level. We can always come back into this body and do another appropriation for $1.5 million later. The reason why I would prefer we do it that way is that we can make sure that we're going to be funding our recovery operations from the actual emergency money if it does become available. Another concern, Mr. Chairman, is that, and this is kind of getting into the next amendment of the funding sources, the highway fund has money because we raised the gas taxes, and that was supposed to be to fix roads. And the Healthy Futures Fund is a funding source for the hospital, which has activated the entirety of the pharmaceutical fund to pay for its needs and has not been able to allocate any of that pharmaceutical fund for Medicaid. And so this is one of those situations where taking from those particular funds is actually eroding the funding availability of critical need areas that also have been funded by tax increases recently by this body. So I would, I know there's an amendment on the floor to increase it to 3 million. I would advise perhaps colleagues that we consider increasing it to 1.5 million and not doing it as an appropriation, but instead just increasing the authorization. The authorization was for 250,000. If we increase it up to 1.5 million, that should cover the costs, and the governor is authorized to expend that money from the general fund as opposed to from those special funds. I'd like to thank General Leon Guerrero and Mr. Leon Guerrero and the panel for being very straightforward with what their funding needs are. And I would like to reserve whatever time I have, Mr. Chairman, because there are still issues that I have with the way the bill is constructed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Next was Senator Regine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, gentlemen, for joining us this evening. Yeah. One of the questions that I had as we were going back and forth with the discussion is, what is the total matching, I guess the expected total matching funds for FEMA? Maybe we can use Typhoon Dolphin as a baseline.
The match is set at 75-25. It's a hard and soft match. In terms of the length of time to get a reimbursement, we could expect anywhere from 3 to 5 years. We're just closing out for Typhoon Halong, and we expect another year and a half to close out Typhoon Dolphin.
Okay, and what was the amount that was requested for Typhoon Dolphin?
For Typhoon Dolphin, I'll get that amount because it's public assistance. I believe it was somewhere in the range of 15 million.
I'm sorry, can you repeat
15
that?
million?
15 million.
I believe, yeah. I believe that was the amount.
And can you explain the 75-25?
Yeah, so we pay 75%, which we've already expended 75%. I'm sorry, we spend money, and then FEMA will reimburse us up to 75%. So we have to, as long as we meet that 25%. So let's say we have something that we need repaired. So we front all of it, and FEMA will give us 75% of that back.
So the $15 million that you were referring to from Typhoon Dolphin, that's only represents 75% of what was actually spent?
75% of is what we were reimbursed.
Right.
Yeah.
And that amount is $15 million?
No.
So 15 million is what was
75% of 15 million.
So 15 million is what was requested?
Yeah.
Okay.
That what was through the joint damage assessment. Yeah, because the way it works is we do our initial damage assessment, FEMA has to come and verify.
Right.
And then we develop the project worksheets, and then it's like any other project, cradle to grave. There are periodic performance measures that we have to submit, metrics we have to meet, milestones.
Right. Yeah. And one of those reports is a Department of Agriculture report that needs to be submitted 15 days after the event. Is that correct?
So there are different reports because there are different types of assistance. There's public assistance, which is for government, individual assistance for homes. Right. Typhoon Dolphin, we did not qualify for individual assistance at the time. There's also SBA disaster loan, and there's a lot of different assistance programs, and it's all based on the damage assessment that
Thank you.
Yeah.
So speaking of these assistance programs, what program is specifically targeted to addressing issues related to crop damage for our local farmers?
So that would be under probably under the U.S. Department of Agriculture, their assistance that they provide as well. But the public assistance covers government operations.
Thank you. In the back and forth from the retiring speaker with regard to overtime, I also had some concerns about the $750,000 in overtime. And one of the questions that I had, actually for the DPW director, Mr. Leongro, you had mentioned that there was transport and disposal of green waste that has been done and is continuing. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
That there's been transport and disposal of green waste that is ongoing.
It has not been transported. As I said,
You just moved it to the side.
just move it to the side, and we will collect that and to 5 collection points.
But you're anticipating this $847,000 in overtime for DPW to be able to transport and dispose of the green waste, correct?
The overtime for debris cleanup would be 350,000, yes.
Oh, 350.
The total ask I'm asking for is 857. About 847, 850, yes.
Right. One of my questions was the waste disposal. Is that going to be contracted or is that going to be performed by DPW employees?
We don't have the permit to properly chip or burn. So the contractors that are permitted are who we're contracted with, and they'll take, that's about 250,000 for the green waste.
So the 350K is for the overtime, and
Yes.
your request is for 847. That includes the contract for the green waste disposal, correct?
For my portion, yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll reserve the balance.
Senator Lee, just one more point
Yes,
of clarification. Chuck mentioned another 100,000 for the white goods. That's the tin, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking leaves, branches, trees, etc. He's also incorporated that in his estimate. It's another 100,000.
Okay. And who are you contracted with for the green waste disposal?
Currently, we're contracted with Pacific Unlimited, and they're also going to be contracted to take the white goods, if you would, the metallic waste. I understand that they're not permitted to dispose of it, but it would be their responsibility to take it to the metallic sites. So our process is we have 6 designated permitted sites that we will take the green waste from the roadways and put it at those sites. The 19 mayors all have their own 19 individual sites that they're going to collect. We'll obviously help them at their big trees that they have to move, and we need to move them with dump trucks and backhoes. We'll do that and take it to the 19 municipal places. And that contract that we're talking about will also go and pick up at these 19 municipal sites.
Thank you. Mr. Estevez, you mentioned about the crop damage program, and that's funded federally, you were saying?
Yes, and it'll be the federal government to determine whether or not we qualify for that type of assistance.
But I also believe that there's a local law. There should be a local program for crop
I would have
damage
to
as well.
defer that to the director for the Department of Ag.
Okay. Are you able to get that information back to the body?
Right now?
Yeah, when you're able.
Okay.
Okay. And as well as a dollar figure that you might have set aside for that.
Yeah, the
purpose.
crop damage and a lot of those estimates are still ongoing. As I said, we have 30 days, and we do this assessment with the federal government to determine that they're allowable costs.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Lee. Senator Steves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Esteves, now for the emergency, for them, besides the accepting of the emergency declaration, is there a threshold level that needs to be met for some of the programs, such as the program for farmers, for crops? Are they looking for a threshold of damage?
Normally for the crops and for, I don't have that exact figure, but for the public assistance program, it's normally about $1 million or more that we have to exceed. Individual housing, it really depends on the number of homes that are damaged, lost, and also the number of shelteries. And so there is a formula that FEMA has to make these estimates. Like I said, it's a joint damage assessment that we do with FEMA. And I'll give you an example. For, let's say we cut down a tree, we have to measure the stump of that tree. For the debris, we have to measure the size of the waste pile. And so it's a long process, it's very deliberate, and there are a lot of different ways that they calculate.
Now, does FEMA have a recommendation or provide a recommendation to the administration at the federal government as to whether or not they meet a threshold? I mean, obviously the president's the one who's going to have to make the declaration based with the governor's request, but is there a recommendation that goes with FEMA? I mean, as
yes.
part of their assessment?
Yes, so the actual disaster declaration that the governor will be signing upon completion of the joint damage assessment lists everything on there as required by FEMA. But we've already, based on our initial damage assessment, we've already exceeded the $1 million threshold of damages incurred.
Thank you. So we've gotten the overtime request and amounts from DPW. We've gotten it from representative from the Guard. And just based on the number that you put out, was that $750,000 for the Mayor's Council alone, or all other line agencies besides DPW and the Guard?
Those are for line agencies plus the Mayor's Council of Guam, so it's consolidated.
And what other line agencies would be looking for overtime, and would you be able to share? I mean, I think Mr. Burns might be able to provide what agencies have requested overtime.
And so this is also for overtime incurred. The Guard alone has already pretty much eaten up the $80,000 in the initial $250,000, and they're actually short. But this is also for GFD, GPD, Department of Education, because they provided their administrators to be shelter managers. I stated the Mayor's Council of Guam, and pretty much every line agency that provided a response activity coordinator in one of the 16 emergency support functions in the Emergency Operations Center.
So we're already about, in just overtime alone, already at about $2 million. And
750,000 plus DPW's
about 1.3
plus the Guard, yes. And like I said, although we put it in the object class for overtime, for the Guard, that money is really salaries, fringe, and not overtime, but salary and fringe.
But doesn't include the food, correct?
Say again?
Doesn't include the food. So the food
it does not include field feeding. Okay.
So in overtime pay, salary, fringe, we're already at $2 million. And again, to reiterate, so it's $250,000 in contractual cleanup alone, correct? Green waste, metal, both white goods and brown waste?
And metallic?
Metallic?
Green waste and metallic would be about $350,000.
So 2.25, and that was 150,000 in fuel for the heavy equipment, and that's not incorporated in the 847,000, right? Correction, 772,000 post cleanup, or post typhoon.
My fuel, sir, is 10,000. That's what I'm budgeting for or estimating.
Okay. Now, Mr. Leon Guerrero, just to reiterate, is this the remaining balance of that money?
No, the balance for $1 million that we've collected, then I would trust Mr. Carlson's estimate. So my lapses are 500,000.
So you're tracking 500,000. What are we tracking for the closeout of the FY? Because if we're requesting 3 million, and I understand there are two different amendments, Mr. Chairman, but if we're looking at 1.5 from the Guam Highway Fund alone, how much is actually in there and how much is actually available? I mean, are we going to be able to meet that 1.5 from that funding source for this fiscal year?
Yes, Senator, I can answer that question. In the highway fund, there's just under 3.5 million.
But what was that amount again? Can you speak a little bit louder, Mr. Burns? What was the amount?
In the highway fund, there's just under 3.5 million.
3.5 million available, is that what you're saying?
In cash, yes.
And again, I'm understanding that this amount was based on the surcharge increase that DPW didn't have, because I think there was a bill out, but they didn't have the authorization to spend it. Is that correct?
Senator, I don't know if it's an authorization issue as much as it is.
I mean, an appropriation issue.
Yeah, I mean, I think DPW and Glenn, maybe you can chime in. You've got a lot of mandates. He talked about the amount of equipment that he has, and but
yeah,
some of it's down.
Mr. Leon Guerrero,
yeah.
If you can please, because I'm just trying to figure out there's 3.5 million in there. I think I understand why you have 3.5 million in Guam Highway funds sitting there, but would you be able to reiterate? Was this because of the surcharge and the lack of the upping in your appropriation for 2018? Is that the reason?
I'm not sure. Can I ask you to repeat the question, please?
We increased the fuel surcharge.
Yes.
To put more money in there to build
Yes.
roads.
Yes.
I remember there was an issue because you didn't have the appropriation level to match the increase in funds to the highway fund. But what I'm trying to get at is, before we give away, special fund, $3.5 million that was used to repair roads, I'm trying to figure out why it was made in a statement by Mr. Carlson that you weren't going to be able to spend that money.
Yeah,
I'm
going to have $1.5 million that I'm not going to be able to spend. I'm going to have lapses in. 500 of that is from the Territorial Highway Fund. The remaining $1 million is from the TEF. Now, if Mr. Carlson says that we have additional funds in that fund, he would know. I'm not monitoring that fund. I'm just monitoring my budget, sir.
So minus you're going to have 500,000 in lapses from the Guam Highway Fund.
Yes.
Okay. So what you were saying was 1.5 you wouldn't be able to spend, but now we're talking about 1 million from TEF, 500,000 from the Guam Highway. Correct?
Correct.
In your budget alone.
Yes.
Which you're pretty much funded out of that. And what I'm understanding now is there's 3.5 million in the Guam Highway Fund. So let's minus out the 500,000 that would be appropriated to you. Where's the other 3 million been? And I'd have to look back at the budget on where else that's been appropriated, but it should have gone to DPW. So I'm just wondering how there's currently 3.5 million in the account.
So just so I can track, and we're tracking, the budget for this fiscal year that I'm spending now that I have $500,000 lapse was signed and approved back in August or of last year. We did not have this 4 cents come into play. It was brought in later on, I think in November, or I don't remember, October, November of last year, and it became effective January. We never accounted for that money.
And that's why,
in my current,
and I guess now you're catching up to what I've been saying. The 3 million is because you didn't have the appropriation in the 2018 budget to spend it, correct?
That's right, that's right.
All right, so now that we're all on the same page, I just wanted to be clear. There wasn't a magic 3 million kind of floating down there. The 3 million is because you didn't have the appropriation in your budget to spend it for this fiscal year, and that it wasn't that you just did not spend the money that was appropriated to you to go fixing roads, you just didn't have the appropriation, correct?
Right. And just to be clear, we have fiscal year FY19 budget in, and you've given me $3 million to spend for village roads. Again, so that's...
But that 3 million wasn't based on the lapses for 2018, correct?
No, that's our budget for FY19.
Point of information. Yes, this is the exact discussion we had during the budget, and that was Mr. Byrne, when he came in and told us the balance of the fund. We appropriated that balance for FY19. to do additional roads. In addition to the regular appropriation they were getting, we were taking that balance from the increase in liquid fuels tax and appropriate toward village roads in FY19. That's correct.
So what I'm trying to say is there really isn't 1.5 million in that account because it's been appropriated for 2019. We'd have to go back and de-appropriate it for the 2019 outlook. So there would actually be, I guess you're saying 1 million from TEF, which might be something to look at, and then 500,000 from the remainder of the Guam Highway that you won't be able to spend could get to that 1.5 million. But if we're looking at an amendment to just have it purely based on the Guam Highway Fund, I think we need to relook at that. Would we be able to confirm if they really are going to have 1 million in lapses from TEF, Mr. Burns? Or Mr. Carlson?
I believe Mr. Leon Guerrero's statements are accurate.
And Mr. Chairman, I understand. I just wanted to reiterate these points. I know we're taking them as two separate amendments, but I think it's crucial if we're trying to identify the 3 million, if that's our mark, if, you know, even with the funding sources, we'd actually be able to get there. At this time, I don't believe I have any questions. I do have an amendment on the bill itself, but as for the amendment, I do agree that we're close enough to the 300 million, and I understand that a little flexibility is going to only benefit the situation. I don't think $200,000 in being flexible in an emergency situation is too much to ask, considering we still have people out there I'm telling you, I've seen it already. I gave family a ride trying to locate their family members because they have no contact. They're walking between villages like 10 miles. I mean, there are still people out there in dire situations, and if this allows the flexibility for us to address those or be able to provide additional support, maybe not directly monetary support to some of the nonprofit organizations that are executing the brunt of the work in terms of feeding and housing the people in need, I think that's essential. I mean, this is an emergency situation, Mr. Chairman. I think I understand it's necessary to be frugal, but we really are talking about people's lives and people who have lost everything. It's not going to be candy, rainbows, and cotton candy right now. There are people who have lost everything. And so whatever we can do to get back to some normalcy so that we can focus our community efforts on supporting those people that lost everything, then I think we need to do that.
Okay, thank you very much, Senator. Senator Espaldon?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, actually, quite a few of the questions that I had in my mind have already been asked and answered. But I do have kind of like a general question. And maybe Mr. Carlson, probably because you're the most senior in terms of who's been around the longest. Well, let me just ask, first of all, this was a Category 1 or 2 typhoon? Anybody? It was a Category 2. Can somebody just tell me, back in 2002, Pong Song Hwa was a Category what? 4? 4 or 5? And the reason I just kind of going down this road is because after Pong Song Hwa, what was requested and what was delivered was $3 million at that time. And because of the severity, I think those of us who went through it remember it, and we were without power for weeks on end, if not months on end, and without water, for weeks on end, if not months on end, and there was debris, much more than what we're seeing right now. And I understand the increase in the cost of living and everything else that would, inflate the cost over what was spent in Pong Song Hwa. But we're asking for the same amount after a typhoon that really destroyed the island back then. $3 million, I mean, and so I don't know. And again, maybe I'm off base, but Glenn, I know you're shaking your head. I'm going to go ahead and let you say something.
I'm speaking out of turn, Senator.
No, I gave you permission.
But I can tell you GPAs was in the tens of millions of dollars that they spent, and I don't even know what GWAs was, and
I agree, but again, they're not included in this bill, and GWA was included in that bill under a separate appropriation at that time, probably because they're an autonomous or semi-autonomous agency. But in terms of the general operations of the government of the Guam, that was basically what was asked and what was delivered after Condition 4. I think it was basically a super typhoon more than anything else. And now we're faced with a category 1, 2, let's call it a 2, just to be on the more, critical side. And yet we're still seeking, we're seeking the amount that was asked after a Category 4 super typhoon. And I guess economically, has inflation risen that much that we're asking for the same amount of what was asked after a super typhoon?
Senator, with regard to the Guard was paid direct federal funds, so we didn't have to go to the legislature, but we had to justify it through federal funds. So at that time, Guam was declared a disaster area, whereas this one, Guam is not declared a disaster area. Yet.
Okay, so I can take it from that answer then that if we are declared a disaster area, that the Guard's obligations are going to be paid for through federal funds, but it would be reimbursed after the fact, right? Is that what it comes out to? Okay, and again, I'm just trying to get a little clarity here and try to put perspective on this for all of us here. Nobody can deny there is an emergent situation on our island, and we just need to get to that certain point. But again, a lot of the questions have been asked, Mr. Chairman. I'm looking at the figures also of what was presented. Again, I'll reserve some of my time and allow some of our colleagues to ask further questions, and we all can be enlightened at that point. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Espaldon. Senator Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here. I just want to point out, Mr. Chair, that it's certainly difficult to know how much to plan for or how much cost is needed during a time of emergency or times of emergencies. And there, as the panel spoken earlier or made it very clear, this is still ongoing and assessments are being made. We only have a few line agencies up here, and I'm sure there's other agency heads doing their work to assess the damages not only to the agencies, but to ensure that they report accurately back to this panel. Mr. Chair, it's better to have it, not need it, than need it and not have it. And this is ongoing. This is an emergency. And I really believe as the numbers, as the more we talk here, we see the numbers continue to climb. And this request here, I believe, is something that the governor is seeking to work with so we can get this island back to some normalcy. So, Mr. Chair, I support the amendment. And I hope we can get our body to support this amendment and move forward. These guys need to get back to work. And I hope that we go and understand that there's a lot of things that our people need out there, a lot of help that our people need out there. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. So that exhausts the list of questions. Senator, Vice Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I've been trying to look very closely at what the governor was going to ask us, Emergency Procurement Authority, and in the original bill, it was to use $1 million or even $3 million from the general fund or from any special fund without really specifying. And this is all in addition to the $250,000 that he has already authorized himself to use pursuant to his executive orders. So he issued 3 executive orders declaring an emergency, authorizing overtime by all government of Guam agencies, it says, at the direction of the Office of Homeland Security. And so if I just want to be clear, and you know, bringing into active duty the National Guard members. But so can you just clarify, when the ability to use the $250,000 is also accompanied by a requirement for a written report of the expenditures and the sources. So this handout that you've given us is pretty much the written report of the expenditures pursuant to the executive orders, emergency declaration, the $250,000. And so all we need to know is where this came from. These are coming from other agency appropriations. That's correct? It says because it's coming from general fund appropriations for the executive branch. So we just wanted, I guess, are we going to get a listing of where those are coming from? That's one.
For the 250?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Right? So that's due within 5 days of use. The second thing is, yeah, so we also, in addition to the 3 executive orders, we know that the governor, pursuant to the FY18 budget, has regular transfer authority. So I'm guessing that that's also being used, right? Because things are being authorized way in excess of the $250,000, right? Overtime is being authorized now in excess of that amount or not?
We are looking prospectively, and we're hoping that we can get the support of the body to be able to continue the efforts. Therefore, we need the authorization. So what Mr. Leon Guerrero and General Leon Guerrero and Mr. Esteves have stated is that going forward, we need this amount of money to continue the efforts. I would be remiss if I didn't remind the body that if we don't get the authorization, then our recovery efforts come to a screeching halt.
All right, well, I thought that Mr. Esteves had told us that this is the amount that he pretty much authorized, this $250,000, but there were additional requests from agencies that they also are incurring additional costs, right? You have a current assessment of $5 million, you said, right? That comes to my next question is, there's also these press releases that the governors made several, or I saw 2 press releases, let's be specific. One is to the Department of Interior and the FSM, to government, to help those that were displaced by the typhoon. And the second one was for it says, it's a news release. Governor Calvo submits intent to request for major disaster declaration. It doesn't give an amount here, so I think this is what you're clarifying today, that this is your initial preliminary assessment was for $5 million, but you expect that to grow in the next 2 weeks. You're going to have FEMA come in here and expand on that assessment. So you have some time, and you expect no less than $5 million, I'm guessing, right? All right. Can we see the documents that were actually submitted to, these are just press releases. So if you submitted a preliminary assessment, to me, it would have cut so much of this debate, right? Because we would have had it all in front of us, and same thing with, right? All of you, if whatever you're doing, I'm sure you are reporting to this is a, very high-ranking panel we have in front of us that I'm sure you all are reporting to each other or to the governor, what you're actually incurring, and all of that, according to his executive orders, have to be in writing. They have to be documented, and I'm just, you know, it's just a little frustrating that we have to go the back and forth to get the answers, as opposed to give us everything you've got. You're asking for, you know, $3 million. Give us everything. It's an emergency. I know you've got it. Spread it out. Pass it out. Let's see what it is. And particularly, I think, you know, people want to know, what is this money going to get us in terms of, yeah, exactly what some of the senators asked you. Is this going to help those people who don't have shelter? Is this going to improve our power situation or not, right? Or is it going to improve our roads permanently, our flooding, or is it just literally clearing the debris? So we're just gathering bits and pieces from the back and forth, but I'm saying if you've got the plan, let's see it, how much it's going to cost, and if you've got what you've already incurred, let's see that too. Because, I don't know, my experience is that people, they want to know, I don't know, it was my understanding today, for example, the use of the National Guard, that we've got almost all the intersections are back to power, not all of them. So I guess I was hoping you were going to come down here and tell us, this is the situation we're facing, right? We still got this many intersections that we need traffic control, or we've got other situations that we need the National Guard. I know they're helping clearing debris, and just, you know, lay that all out so that not just us, but the public can see it right away. They don't have to, you know, pull teeth to get this information. Because I'm sure you are operating like that up there at your command center, right? That you have a plan, you know where you want everybody to be, and what's the purpose? Is it traffic control? Is it debris clearing? You know, or is it flood prevention? Because, you know, that's our priority. I saw in the executive orders those three things. So those are the three things I'm talking about. But you guys are talking about a lot of other things, right? And so, I don't know. At the end of the day, we want to be able to tell the public what this money is going to go for. I mean, we're saying overtime, right? But what does that mean? Keeping shelters open. How many shelters are you going to keep open for how long? All we're talking about here, I mean, it's just rephrasing, maybe, right? So I'm thinking if it was in writing, maybe all my questions would be answered. Because you're talking about overtime for this many days, but what is, you know, the end result? Or what is the damage that's addressing? Because otherwise, yes, I was concerned with the bill because we are, I mean, I want to be flexible in an emergency, and I want to commend all of you, by the way, for your, you know, excellent notice to all of us, and preparation and responses. So I don't want to underestimate that. I could go on all day, but, you know, I want you guys to get back to what you're doing also. So that's why I'm saying for us to get to what we need to do, I would just say give us everything you've got and give us the assessments. That's what FEMA's looking at. That's what you're giving the federal government. That's what the governor looked at before he came down and said, I need $3 million more, right? But from what we have in front of us, you know, we're having to do this banter back and forth to determine that, I guess. So it just seems a little unorganized, and maybe, like, I don't know, like it's not a plan of, you know, recovery, I guess. So the other thing is that we're changing the procurement authority for this money, different, and it's going to be much less restrictive than it was for the $250,000 even. And I'm wondering why, especially if you're not even going to submit your assessment for a few weeks at least. And am I correct, Mr. Estevez, to say that all the money that we might appropriate in this bill, we are not going to spend that in the next 2 weeks? You're going to use that for matching funds from FEMA?
Madam Speaker, so FEMA has two categories under public assistance: emergency work and permanent work. So the damages that we receive from the field of facilities and whatever that may be, those are future projects that we would have to eventually find a match for.
Find a match? Oh.
Yes.
So you're not talking at all in this bill about matching funds?
Yeah, so this 3 million in what was called Category A, Category B project worksheets. This is emergency work. This is stuff that's ongoing recovery and maybe actually ongoing response too. So when the agencies submit their damage assessments, that's not related to this 3 million. That's separate. That's more so for permanent work that we would have to move to begin moving forward. This is all to, as everyone keeps,
This 3 million, though,
is
what
to
you're
normalcy.
hoping to recover.
Yes,
to be reimbursed, or
yes.
75% of it.
Correct,
No?
but there's still, this is for emergency work, and then we still have to determine if there are potential projects for permanent work.
Okay, in addition to this.
Correct. So we're not completely fixing things that are broke. You know, that's future work that we'll eventually have to find a match for. We're just trying to bring the island back to normalcy, to a regular steady state. And if we don't use the 3 million, then we're not going to try to keep spending until we use the 3 million, because you know that money has to come from somewhere.
Yes, and so the original bill said it's going to come from any agency or any special fund. So I'm glad we're narrowing it down to the couple. But so speaking of which, if I could ask Mr. Carlson, this 1 million lapses in TEFF, why is that? Where did that come from?
What we had, Vice Speaker, was we wanted to get bus drivers into I need 130 physical bus drivers. Today I have 12 that are on light duty. And so I'm asking for an additional 12 more. That $900 million was originally budgeted. We were looking at 30 additional bus driver positions, and because it's taken us so long, we haven't been able to fill those vacancies or fill those positions. And so that's the 900 or close to $1 million that we have in the TEF.
All right, it's just a little alarming because we raised real property tax, we raised fuel tax, and yeah, we're not able to fill positions. It's not making any sense to me that we have lapses like that. All right. So do you have the preliminary assessment that you sent with the intent to request for major disaster declaration?
Yes, we have the draft damage assessments. They're up at our agency. It's a really thick stack. But next week, Tuesday and throughout the week, we'll begin our joint damage assessments with FEMA. For both public assistance and individual assistance.
All right, because one of the executive orders said all the agencies have to submit their draft assessments within 72 hours. So you have all those.
We have those.
And then, is that where you got the 5 million amount?
That's where we got the estimated 5 million.
Okay, if we could just see whatever you submitted with this intent to request, I think that would help. And what is the situation with the use of the National Guard? I mean, do you expect that to go for as long as they're estimating?
We plan we have an anticipated end date, but if we don't need them, then we'll make the recommendation to General Leon Guerrero to scale down operations, pull back as needed. But then again, on the same note, should we need to extend them, we just want the flexibility to do so. And as an example, there are traffic lights that are up, but if you notice, they continue to blink, and that's only because of the ongoing power restoration. So every time they have to shut down power and bring it up, those traffic lights, go into to blink mode, and so that means Mr. Languro has to take someone from the field doing some other operation to reset the light. And so it's, I can tell you that, you know, with every emergency situation, there is that level of chaos that we try to manage. And we're trying to manage our expectations in regards to what we need. All our costs are simply estimates. We have an end state in mind, and you know, we're humbly asking that you support us with this appropriation.
Mr. Longer.
In regards to the signal lights, I have 60 signal lights, and I have 6 technicians that actually address that. So as Chuck had mentioned, Mr. Estevez mentioned, if we get a light working, we're good, we go to the next light. And then if GPA, for whatever reason, turns off the power, turns back on the power, it's got to be reset. So that we have 2 crews, basically 3, but we only have 1 bucket truck. So for all 60 lights, we need the support. In addition to the signal lights, which is important, the other issue that we're having help with the guard is we're asking them to go to our recovery, the 5 sites that we'll take debris from and put into an approved EPA site. The guard is going to clear the sites for us and prepare it for us, and then we'll contract for a security guard to make sure that when people aren't coming in and putting things that they shouldn't be putting in. Then we've also asked the guard to, because again, we've only got 40 people in federal highway, in the highway maintenance crew, and we're asking the guard to help us pick up the debris from throughout. We've got 19 villages. We've got, like I said, there are some certain roads that have big trees that mayors can't take care of, so we'll use the heavy equipment to do that. And so that's where we're helping. We've given them assignments for certain roads, and I don't have them right off the top. Maybe the general has his those lists, but I know we've asked them. We're doing this as a collaborative effort to get us back to normal as soon as possible. And again, the goal is to get us back to normal. We're targeting the 27th of September, 2 more weeks or 3 more weeks.
So, Mr. Byrne, if the money is used from the highway fund, or from highway fund, I guess that's what we said, DPW. I'm trying to remember the amendment, just give me 1 sec. From the Guam Highway Fund, then does that mean 1.5 million from the Guam Highway Fund in this bill would mean the 500,000 from its lapses and 1 million from the TEFF, or 1 million from the 3.5 that you're talking about? I mean, from that FY19, from the money that we were trying to appropriate in FY19 to fix more village roads. Yeah. Would that be reduced?
Senator, I think the proposal was to take 1.5 million from the 3.5 million. And having said that, I think it should be recognized that just under 900,000 is DPW's work.
Right.
And therefore it doesn't seem too inappropriate to take it from the highway fund.
Yeah, I was wondering, why are they not, if they have an appropriation outstanding for $500,000, why are they not able to just use that for this work?
Can I answer that real quick? I can't transfer the TEFF to another
special fund.
Yeah.
That's why we're here.
Yeah, it's a special fund that hasn't been appropriated, and we're trying to get access to those funds.
What about the $500,000 that you said are lapses?
So there are lapses, but it's not something that we've budgeted for. So, yes.
Pardon?
So we have 500,000 in lapses. That's correct, and we could use that for our portion. But at this point in time, the funding is set for again, our 500,000. A majority of that is personnel, and
are you not authorized to use the current appropriation for the $500,000 that's going to lapse for this emergency work?
That's
Not
my,
authorized? Is that correct, Mr. Byrne? What was it for?
for payroll, basically.
Payroll?
Payroll and a majority of the 500,000 was for bus parts.
I guess I'm not understanding why then we're not just reappropriating that 500,000. If he can't use it, he's got it. It's sitting there, cash. He has authority to spend it, and it's not clear to me why he's not just spending it. Why are you here for that amount?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Vice Speaker. Again, that's why we're here. We need the authorization. If this body would just remember that the appropriation was specific to Mr. Leonguero's operations. We're talking about contracting outside of, you know, what it is he's normally going to be doing. For good examples, when he talked about security for the waste sites. There are a number of things that, you know, are entailed here. We came before you with a request to take $1.5 million from the Guam Highway Fund and $1.5 million from the Healthy Futures Fund.
All right, right. And I'm just asking, the current $500,000 appropriation that he hasn't spent cannot be used because it's been appropriated for operations? You're not making, it's not clear, Mr. Carlson. You said it's been appropriated for operations. Is that correct? No, he said 500,000.
Yeah, Glenn, you said it's
not the TEFF. We're talking about the Guam Highway Fund.
Bus ops. Yeah.
The 1 million was appropriated for bus drivers, so I understand that one. That one, all we need to do is change it from the use for bus drivers to use, you know, for operations, right?
Okay, so we're here to ask for $3 million. If the body is comfortable with reallocating anticipated lapses from TEFF.
Are you disagreeing about, we just want the facts. Is it, are there, he says he's unable to spend the $500,000 because of either the way it's written or what? So that's why I'm asking. It's sitting there, it's able to be used, right? We're in emergency.
Yeah, if you want to take $500,000 and augment that with $1 million from Guam Highway Fund and $1.5 million from Healthy Futures Fund, I think we're okay. But you just need to give us the authorization.
No, you're asking for $1.5 million from the Guam Highway Fund, and
Can I think I don't have the authority, because I don't have through the executive order to go and do procurement, emergency procurement. That's these guys.
That's what you want.
That's what we want, yes.
Okay.
So I cannot go to Pacific Unlimited and say, okay, we want $250,000 for green waste, and because I don't have emergency procurement authorization. He has, and we go through him. That's why the money has to be funneled through FEMA, through civil defense, so that when it comes through FEMA, and we're looking to get this money back. I know I don't have 500,000. There's no way I can spend it, but we need to go through this mechanism so that I can get the debris disposed of. I can't do it unless you give me emergency procurement, and I don't know how that works out with FEMA, but that's the reason why we're asking for that to be transferred to this fund, is because that lines up with the executive order.
all right. Is there a reason, Mr. Estevez, why you need this type of procurement versus the procurement that you were authorized for the $250,000 emergency funding?
It's the same emergency procurement.
No, it's different.
It's
Yeah.
asking.
The procurement process that is outlined here is different than the one that you're currently using.
Okay.
Anyways, I think that was the subject of someone's floor amendment that we might discuss, to just make the procurement be consistent with what you are doing with the 250,000. Do you have any objection to that? That works for you right now, right? Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Senator San Agustin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, for my colleagues here, when Major General Youngro talked about 1999, I think most of you were still probably in school. And back then, the National Guard had a big problem about dealing with being on active duty, because I was active duty with the Guard. And every time the governor called us, there's never any money. The request that the governor's asking for is the flexibility to access $3 million. I have not heard from anybody from downtown what the impact would be if you use 1.5 from Guam Highway versus what was appropriated for next year, and 1.5 from the Healthy Future Funds, what is appropriated for next year. What is the impact that the downtown anticipates for next year? Would it be able to still have the same results as what you're using now for emergency, that it will still carry on and help the people of Guam? No? Yes? Mr. Carlson, can you answer that? Because 1.5 from highway was to fix roads that we brought up. Now, the 1.5 from Healthy Future Fund was to support not only the hospital, but the schools and stuff like that. Would that be able to still support them by using this money? Because I haven't heard any cost impact to DOE because of all the shelters and all the damage they've incurred. I haven't heard about when you identify clearing roads, those are probably some of the roads that needs repairs anyway. So the sooner you clear it, the sooner you can fix it. Am I correct, Mr. Nangro?
You're correct, Senator.
Okay. And then for the National Guard members, I'm just surprised there's only 166, General. Back then, you remember, we brought in a lot more. And I wish you had brought in more, because then they would have cleared more, and the troops are out there to help protect life and property. And that I am all hands on deck for them.
Senator, we didn't make it a mandatory state active duty because the storm was not catastrophic. It was a category 2. The forces that we have now are sufficient. In fact, we're talking about, because as the traffic lights start to become operational, we dwindle down our force.
Okay, but will could you be anticipating being asked to help on the debris cleanup?
Yes, in fact, we have been asked. So those individuals that are currently on traffic control, we move them to debris cleanup. And as we do more and more or finish each mission, we release individuals. We've been asked to do debris cleanup. We've been asked to do shelter security. And so as we complete missions, they shift and we do more missions. We've been asked to do cleanup around the island.
Okay.
We're
multi-purpose.
Yes, thank you.
I know where you're coming from, General. My colleagues, I want to remind ourselves that, number one, they're in section 4 on page 2, the reversion clause. If the appropriation authorized on this act is not encumbered, it goes back to where it came from. And I understand from Mr. Esteves is that if you can't show how you can get reimbursed, you can't spend the money. Am I correct? Okay. I'm in support of the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. And I'll recognize Senator Atta and then Senator Uggan. Senator Atta, you're recognized.
Thank you. I got 2 questions. Earlier, one of my colleagues suggested that maybe we should just authorize $1.6 million, expend that, claim the reimbursement, and as the reimbursements come in, kind of treat it like a revolving fund. Is there anything wrong with that picture?
The reimbursements will probably come within 3 to 5 years, or could come up to 5 years.
So it's not immediate.
It's not immediate, okay. Senator.
The other question that I have is in looking at the two sources for the $3 million, it was suggested that 1.5 million would come from, $500,000 will come from the surplus or I guess lapses from the Guam Highway Fund, which you won't be able to spend. And so we're saying that's where we're going to get the 500,000. And then $1 million from the Territorial Education Facilities Fund, which is a surplus. Is that what it is?
It's money that I can't use, Senator. It's a lapse from me.
That you cannot use. Was this 1.5 million captured in was it the fiscal is in the fiscal 18 budget, right? So what if we were to go in there and basically, is there any reason why we can't, I guess the mechanics of reducing the FY18 budget for public works by $1.5 million and repurpose it up here as a source for the $3 million as part of that $3 million that's being requested for. Is there any reason why we can't do that? So that let me just further clarify. So that then then we're basically really just repurposing funds that you're not going to be able to use, right? But the total appropriation remains as is, and we're just going to reduce it, and then basically take the amount that's reduced and repurpose it for the for this emergency fund.
Senator, in choosing which funds were being suggested in order to find these appropriations, we also had to look at the cash positions within those funds. And the two funds that were suggested were the two funds that had the most amount of money in. The TEF fund at this moment doesn't have sufficient cash to subsidize the costs that are needed, which, you know, when I added up the costs that came through in the testimony tonight, it came up to just under $2.5 million, and that didn't include GFD, GPD, and anything DOE, which, although they pay their overtime separately, still comes out of the general fund.
Okay, that's probably getting a little technical for me, but we'll get back to that. Actually, that was the only question that I had on that. I don't have any further questions, but Madam Chair, if we can maybe just take a like a 5-minute recess here, and then we'll come back and pick up again.
Thank you. I'll recognize Senator Uggan first, and then we can take the recess, and then Senator San Nicolas.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Just so that we're all on the same page with some of the numbers that have been thrown out. I mean, it's been a very good conversation in terms of what the requirements are, but there's been a suggestion that the figure be adjusted downward from the second request from the governor's office. So looking at revisiting some of the numbers, the Guam National Guard's approximately 580,000. DPW is approximately 772,350. Correct?
784,000, Senator.
784,000?
600, and then 62,000 for the damages and the compound. So it comes up to 847,000.
So you're back to 847. Why was 75 or 72,000 extracted in a prior conversation? But okay, so we're looking at 847,000, 350 for DPW, and then Mr. Esteves, if you can follow me on this. Based on DPW's presentation, they said the requirement for the agency is approximately $350,000 in overtime expense. Your suggestion or your request for operational overtime requirement was $750,000. I'm under the impression that that's inclusive of DPW.
That does not include DPW or the Guard.
Not inclusive of DPW.
Correct.
Then can you break down exactly what the $750,000 entails?
So their estimated costs that we asked the line agencies and the Mayor's Council of Guam to send us and what they basically need towards recovery operations. Now, mind you, just because they submitted these amounts, I'm the keeper of those timesheets, and I'll say I will make determination if it's allowable or not allowable. So, the 750,000 could be 750,000, it could be less than that. But then again, it could also be more than that based on where we're at in the recovery process. And so that was just the best guess estimate based on what we received from the different agencies. And we have a lot of lessons learned.
I mean, just looking at the 750,000, I was expecting the DPW was inclusive. So now that that's extracted,
yes, it's extracted.
No, yes, it's separate and apart. Right. So now the figure keeps moving from a certain number and then a guess as to what the anticipated requirement is. And I'm trying to make sure that as we look at the numbers, that we all understand where we're at in your requirements. Correct. We know that the Guam National Guard needs no less than 580,000. If in fact all the guardsmen and women are going to be utilized for the entire 21 days. Now, DPW made their presentation of $847,350. So just that alone, we're looking at a significant figure, $1.3, $1.4 million. Two entities. So I'm going to have to request, Mr. Chairman, for a breakdown of that $750,000 overtime request before that's inserted as a full figure. And the reason being is because it all depends on what the work requirements are. We know that 30 schools now are back up and running, or will be up and running tomorrow. We also know that a number of villages and the mayors and vice mayors and their staff have been doing a good job working with some of the government agencies in terms of getting some semblance of normalcy to their villages. So if most of the work has been done over the course of the last 3-4 days, what is the projected overtime for? Is it going to entail the next 10 days when in fact the work may not be necessary? And then that's going to be an additional figure that is going to be requested. Going down the numbers that you provided, again, Mr. Esteves, generators, because DPW said there's $10,000 that they need for fuel for generators, you provided a $100,000 figure.
So that's exclusive. This is ongoing fuel operations for agencies that are still on generator power. And so that's our estimated, and if we don't use it, then we're not going to use it. If we don't need it, we're not going to use it, and we're not trying to.
No, I understand it, but I'm trying to work with you in terms of numbers because there's a suggestion about revisiting the number and reducing it downward from the $3 million request.
All right, Senator, excuse me. We're going to need to recess so that the system can be rebooted. Otherwise, we're going to. Okay. So let's take a 10-minute recess, and maybe we can work out something.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. We're in recess.